Welcome, guys, to another CEO Wisdom podcast with Sam Pepin. Sam is a fellow Quebecer, fellow serial entrepreneur with an international mindset. I would describe that guy as he is quite similar to me when I actually started in business. So, quite smart with multiple ventures and quite the uncommon guy. You're going to learn about his background soon. Podpire.com is promoting this podcast. So Podpire is my podcasting company. If you want to start, scale, monetize a podcast through AdSense, through lead gen and sponsors, you can go to podpire.com. We have a free ebook and a masterclass there. Sam, welcome to the pod. Tell me a bit more about yourself and what you're up to nowadays.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me, Charles. It's a pleasure to be here. I was born and raised in Montreal, like you said, fellow Québécois, and was very big into sports. Played soccer all the way to the national scene with Team Canada, and that made me learn a lot about just sacrifice, teamwork, and so on. Started in business very, very young, back in the days of the pandemic. I was a remote seller and closer. I'm sure you remember these days. Make 10K with the comfort of your home. So that was very attractive to me and was able to sharpen my skills. And now I'm piloting basically 23 team strong a marketing agency. We're worldwide companies, already in 7 countries. Work on a few big deals right now. Go-to-market strategies for overseas companies and overall integrations of very interesting systems and AI.
So let's start with your sports career. Why didn't you scale that?
Yeah, it's a great question. I suffered a major injury to my left leg when I was just nearly basically 16 years old, and that really took a hit on my confidence. I'm now 40, basically came back to my peak performance physical wise, but at that time that was a little bit of the superhero kind of like dream, kind of like fading out. So definitely with a better mindset, I'm sure that I would have been able to continue on at this career. But no, for me, sports was fantastic for that stage of my life because it gave me discipline. And I know you talk about this very often, Charles, but obviously there's no dream being accomplished without a plan and focus. And that really serves me well in my entrepreneur career. But I just felt like it was time to move on.
Right. And during the pandemic, selling slash generating leads and closing, how did
Yeah.
you first got into that opportunity? Because it takes a very specific mindset. It's a tough job as well, especially if you do it full commission. And
Yes.
how did that pan out?
Yeah, it's a great questions. It actually panned out very, very well. I was full commissions, found that opportunity on Facebook. So I was just scrolling, and it was a remote. I think the group is called Remote Setter and Closer, something like that. And I just went there, met that guy, and give him a ring right away. I didn't even message him. I just give him a phone call. I said, "Look, this is me. This is who I am. Give me a shot." And to be very honest, and this is me being very transparent. I did that because there was some urgency from the family, from my mother's side of her world and her life, basically collapsing with some personal issues. So I took the what I consider the main role of being a provider, and being able to do that was very was just very interesting and very empowered. By that, I was able to make actually $10,000 in my 3rd month doing that full commission. So I was always a very driven guy, always on the phone, working until like 16 hours a days. And so that shaped pretty much my discipline and my resilience, perhaps.
Wow. And what did you sell and for who?
Yeah, it was a social media package. It was actually a LinkedIn basically optimization and growth package. It was to service-based business, B2B service-based business. I'm sure you see this offer quite often now. And we had an interesting way to doing that with the funnel and so on, which was working pretty well. And my objective as obviously a setter and closer was I started as a setter, and then when you got a bit more experience, then you were a closer, which is much easier job in my opinion. But it was just about trying to assess relationships, obviously assess their needs. It gave me really sharpens my sixth sense, as I like to call it, which is just my ability to read people. And I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. How was it for you to shape in that perhaps what I call the 6 skills and be able to understand what to say when and how and so on?
Yeah, that was amazing for me. I'm directly relating my background to yours because when we start, we're quite like vulnerable, right, in this market because we don't know about that market, but we have the energy, right, as youngsters. And for me, my first mentor, there was a lot of good lessons from him. And yeah, that Sixth Sense for sure, right? He put me in various fields of his business and marketing and operations and HR. I was a CMO at some point, and yeah, of course, closer and deal generator. Unlike you, I didn't generate a lot of deals. When I was a seller, I was extremely uncomfortable on the phone. Not sure if it's my ego or it's my voice or whatever, or if it was my accent. I was selling LED lights to engineers and architects in Canada, so to educated people, right? Imagine
Interesting.
a kid trying to sell you lights, and yeah, it sort of felt at that, but I was very good in the overall business aspects of things. So when I sort of left my mentor to start my own businesses, and with time, I realized that he taught me a lot of good lessons, but
Yeah.
also some bad lessons, right? So, how is it on your side? Like, what did you learn not to do, and what did you learn to actually do and scale?
Yeah, that's such a great questions. You're right. Obviously, I think there is no great advice without some bad ones in there. So the on the great side, truly, and I can mentioning by name, but David's, which was my employer, became my first mentor. Truly allowing me to one believe in myself and to understand that there's some great wisdom in this in the Pareto process, which is the 80-20 rule, which he talked very at length about this concept of reverse engineering as well, from the envision all the way to where they basically currently are. So that was some of the fantastic visions. And on the bad side, I suppose, some of the thing that I would more deeply convey these days, or at least put more of my focus on, is more of the relational basis. So as a setter and closer, your objective is top line revenue, right? So it's all sales, very little relationship being built. And sometimes that's your job, and that's fine. But I encourage basically entrepreneurs and people that wants to play for the long game, for basically not only this quarter but also 5-10 years from now, to truly understand that, one, guard your reputation with your life, because what you do, especially nowadays, if you do a bad job, it gets known very quickly. Same thing if you do a good job. So that's just an extra emphasis on in that regards. So that was point one. Make sure that I value basically relationships over quick sales when it doesn't make sense. And then the second thing was definitely that portions of how to make sure that basically you're not selling just a service, but you're selling an experience. The service might be very good, but if the team implementing it and the culture behind it is bad, unfortunately, that will go way, basically not only slower, but also it won't go the distance. So we were very good at selling that first 3 month sprint, but very poor at actually re-engaging them on long-term contracts. So I was able to get some nuggets of wisdom into what was not working to allow me to learn from that and better myself, and therefore better my companies.
And what do you do nowadays? What's your business? What do you sell to whom?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we're a full service marketing agency. We were able now to truly go a little bit more upscales. We have a lot of medical, basically device clients, a lot of basically practices, a lot of wellness type of companies that interact with us. Our objective basically now is very much more on this concept of meaningful marketing. So our objective is to bridge neuroscience with data-driven initiatives. And what does that look like is we are actually the only agency in the world with a license to what we call the Code 24, which is a neuroscientific process, 40 years of research. And what we saw is very much of an accelerator, basically programs, which allows us to first operate as a consultation, where we basically get a bigger understanding of what you do, how you do that, and then figure out basically where the gaps are within where you want to be. And afterwards provide a concierge service to basically implement those marketing elements.
Right. Okay. So, what are your sales channels nowadays? Do you do LinkedIn outreach, cold outreach? I see you have a lot of testimonials on your LinkedIn as well. What are
Yep.
your GTM strategies?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we have a social media and email plugin. So we do a lot of interaction basically from sourcing basically cold leads from LinkedIn through a nurturing campaigns that we have through a lead magnet and an email sequence that works extremely well. We also have very good SEO ranking from our websites. So we rank very high for marketing. So about 15% of our traffic is direct from our websites. and we pair that persona to PPC ads as well, on a monthly basis. So those are the main channels that we use on top of referral partners, partnerships, networking, which is more the warm channels. What have you find to be most effective right now in the marketing industry for you?
Yeah, cold outreach for sure. Cold email outreach has suffered great deliverability loss last year,
Yes.
but that was picked back up if you're a little hacker like me, if you can fix deliverability, if you can have multiple warmed up inboxes. I personally use Instantly for that. I recently launched a campaign that generated 150 leads in 3 days, so that's not too bad. The podcast funnel is quite good, which is related to my next question. But LinkedIn outreach certainly always works. The podcast funnel, are you leveraging it right now? So you want to be guests on podcasts, but also you have your own. So do you leverage that as a lead generation method?
Absolutely. For me, it's more of a thought leadership device, and that's why I wanted to also pick your brains on how you turn that into a lead gen platforms. Certainly, about 25% of all the basically people that we interview that are not yet clients become clients within 30 days, which is actually fantastic. So the objective with my podcast is to interview basically thought leaders, most importantly, and people with very very big aspirations, either that they are on that journey to basically very big accomplishments, or they are already accomplished big things. A little bit of what your niche seems to be from this podcast, but obviously our objective is to only allow them to understand a little bit of our process through that podcast. The way I interview people is very similar to the way I sell, interestingly enough, and that gives them great insights into what it would look like to work with us. So we generate basically between 1 and 3 podcast lead a week. Those are all warm people that knows me and knows my platforms, which we have a high closing rate on those. So yes, we do have basically an interesting, I wouldn't call it a funnel yet. We are only basically less than 3 months into launching that podcast, but that will be one of our objectives, to make sure that we transform this basically relationship nurturing funnel into a more sales acquisition on top of it, in this first quarter of this year. How are you able to do that also, Charles? I know that you're also a very, very techy, very basically kind of like Silicon Valley type of guy. But what have you find most important to make sure that you scale that operation within your business?
Yeah, well, I think that if people do not pay you, they're not showing you any love. And that's really true in this capitalist system. If you love someone, if you like someone, just pay him money, right? I had a friend that was in the LA fires not so long ago. I go funded that person.
Mm,
If I like this person on my podcast and I think they're a genius, I'm going to invest in their business. I'm going to hire them as a consultant. So I think that if you come on my podcast, for example, and you like the questions that I ask you, if you love who I am, and you love this brain of mine, you think I can have a huge ROI for my business, you should pay me. That's why the lead gen aspect is important in the podcasting game. It also makes the podcasting sustainable, because 90% of podcasts give up between month 12. That's not a surprise. People think a podcast is for fun, right? Um, Money is fun, and we live in a capitalist system, so we need to monetize our activities. I believe money should be part of pretty much everything, even of politics, but not too much, right? It should be humanitarian as well. So I think that if you target your ICP and the podcast funnel of things, that ICP, ideal customer persona, and you talk to someone with whom you share values, you share background, and you're really similar to that person, you guys should definitely work together. So you interview that person on the pod, you subscribe them to a newsletter, you follow one another, right? Like follow swap on LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube, and all, and just send content to one another. Then if you really like that content, then yeah, it's time to buy, right? So
yeah,
that's
yeah.
how I'm viewing things. And people say no to sales calls nowadays. You also get flagged as spam if they really don't like you, and they won't do that through podcasting. So I think it's pretty much genius as a funnel. What are your 2025 goals? What do you have for yourself this year?
Yeah, no, I'll definitely share those. And I have a question I'd like to bounce back to you
Yep.
from podcasting standpoint. Some of our goals this year, first and foremost, is to scale to that $1 million a month. That's going to be very very key for us in our business. That's basically, I'm sharing business goal first. So 1 million a month is very important. Our objective is also to scale our operations to be able to fulfill on more clients. So getting more people on the team and structuring it in a way in which basically make me less and less in the day-to-day operations. I would like to have this year as the year in which I can have a business that runs itself, which was not the case basically prior to now. Which is also very important to not have me basically getting another job, just a it seems it's very interesting job, luxury job, but still another job. So getting myself away from that day-to-day operation is very, very big. And then a third goal and something very much of an aspiration of mine is the philanthropy aspect of it. So my objective this year is to give basically 15% of everything that we generate to different causes that I believe in. I love that example you share about your friend that lost basically their home in California. And that's very, very dear to my heart. So those are for the business standpoints. And from a personal standpoint, I really love what I am, the routine, the discipline that I have. I share my life with a wonderful lady as well. Just making sure that I get closer to my family, closer to my loved ones, make more time to do so is my main focus. And afterwards is to explore more and more for me, a cognitive, basically, a point of view. So becoming sharper, becoming better, period, is an obsession of mine. So being more knowledgeable, being more productive, being more physically capable. Those are definitely my goals. And one thing that was always quite surprising, but I really love about you, Charles, is your mindset about money. You see money as what I think we should all see it, which is purely a resources. You don't basically put a value system towards it. You simply value it as an exchange and as a resource. Where does that came from for you? Did you learn that from one of your mentor, from somebody basically you admire? Tell me more about that relationship of yours.
When I started, I was like you, like this $1 million month goal and the philanthropic keyword. I think, more to that, and not sure if you're like that, but the education that I received from my parents around money was very few. I had a bank account, and that's pretty much it at 15, right? And then what do you do with that money? Then buy that car, like break that car, like I used to do, luxury cars, and then be in debt, right? I blew an engine on a car. I blew a bunch of things on cars. So I was quickly in debt in my life, and that was pretty bad. That was pretty bad start with money. My philosophy with money is not to save it. I love to savor life in some aspects of it and have a great lifestyle. That doesn't mean that I go out and spend on a massive amount of foods and prostitutes, for example. You need to spend on smart stuff, scalable stuff.
Yes.
Business is very scalable. Health is immensely scalable. Education is immensely scalable. But my philosophy with money changed once I became financially independent and once I knew I made it, and I think I was like 5 years ago. And it's not necessarily because I had it in my bank account, but it's just knowing that I had systems that would make unlimited quantities of money, and that I had a brain that could make money on demand, right? And that I had an audience that would give me money on command. So content's really important in that. And once you have enough money, you start being abundant. I was abundant before I had all that money, right? I've always been generous. That's because of my dad. But then I really became abundant. My definition of abundance is when you're just not stressed with money, right?
Yes.
That friend needs money for his burnt house. There you go, take it. That CEO comes on my podcast. That CEO of a nonprofit comes on my podcast. I'll wire some money on a monthly basis, right? And that's my hack for philanthropy, by the way. Don't wait to give like 15% of your business. Try to interview a couple of CEOs of nonprofits. They will be high performers, right? So they will check that box. They will share good information on your pod. And once the pod is done, they have like these monthly subscriptions. So I'm donating a shitload of money on a monthly basis for all the CEOs and the founders of nonprofits that came on this pod. And this is a great hack. Yeah. And then all kinds of causes for girls, for IT, for water supply, for yada, yada. I filtered them also on the pod. It's important that you believe in their cause, right? And that's why the podcast interview. But yeah, my philosophy with money, I mean, I see it as energy. I see it as value, as a token, right? As a token of love also. It's like, I believe in you. There you go. take this money, invest it better, right? And people break their heads normally with like, oh, should I gift this person this or that? Yeah, I just wire Amazon cards is great, for any business owner, or just cash. And then you also want to vet what they're doing with this money, right? Because there's two principles ways of making money in business. And one is buying good stuff, right? Investing right. And then the second is selling. And obviously getting more and more clients. But yeah, my philosophy with money has changed, but we live in a capitalist system and it's mostly adapted to this system. So it's not really like Charles' philosophy. It's like, let me play the money and power game, scale it to its maximum extent. In my case, it's trillions, and then see how I can modify the system and shape it accordingly to what I think is better to humanity and not fall in the corruption trap, right?
Yes.
Selling porn, selling gambling, selling my soul to the devil to make all this money. And when I come to the top, I'm this Donald Trump like a character, right? So I want to make sure that I'm still a good person once I get up there, and that I can challenge the narrative and make something better for all humans, which is a very philosophical and spiritual question, which I know you're somewhat about. What do you think about all of that?
Man, this is so spot on. It seemed like I'm talking with my dad basically on this conversation. It's when I put in words what I want to do in the world. That's exactly right. The truth is, and I love what Nietzsche said. I know this is somewhat of a philosophical platforms, but basically Nietzsche and in Good and Evil was talking very much at length with this concept of do not honor basically the weak. Pity for the weak basically is something that you can have, but giving them power for the simple sake that they're weak is something that we should always avoid. And the reason why he said this is because, like you said, in a capitalist society, those with the power, and therefore those in which basically will hold the keys to how society runs, are those with money, and therefore that money basically give you in the position of powers in the first place. So your abilities should be for yourself to be as selfish until you are sustainable, until you are self-sufficient, and afterwards be as selfless as possible to help the world being a better place. So I 100% agree with you, and I think this is the master mindset.
Love it, dude. Well, thanks for your time today. Eager to come on your pod as well. Where can people find out more about you?
You can, CoreCentrica.com. You'll get all access to our business, basically format, white papers, and so on. And my personal LinkedIn account is probably best, Sam Pepin. On there, you get to see me, and yeah, we get access to all the podcasts and all the platforms that we have also.